Hello, I'm Casey Fatchett, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. On this episode, I'll be talking to my friend Jeremy Harris about being a rock and roll photographer, photographing the likes of Ozzy Osbourne, Slayer, and ZZ Top. All that and more after this short break. Do you find yourself spending a lot of time creating graphics for all of your different social media platforms? You can spend hours and hours working through and resizing for Instagram stories, YouTube cover thumbnails, what's the greatest size for a Twitter profile cover, Facebook page cover. Go to Snappa. Snappa is a great online app, and it's free. With Snappa, you can create hundreds of different pre-formatted layouts for different social media platforms, your blog, your website, YouTube, you name it, they've probably got a pre-sized template for it. And if not, you can create your own size images. I've been using Snappa for months now. It has changed my life. I spend so much less time creating social media graphics. So go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Snappa. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SNAPPA. It's totally free. All right, welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm talking today with Nashville-based photographer Jeremy Harris. He's worked all over the Bay Area, New York City. That's actually where we met. God, it's been 12 years? 10 years? I can't remember.
No, probably about 7 or... Well, yeah, it's been about 9, I think. I moved here 2 years ago. I lived in New York for 8 years, and I got back shortly after I moved to New York.
Was it a Craigslist ad? Was I looking for photographers on a Craigslist ad? May have been.
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been. Time ago.
When you didn't have to pay for a Craigslist ad, you have to pay $5 now to post an ad looking for people to hire. Yeah. You have to pay $5 to say, I want to hire a photographer for something.
I guess I haven't been on Craigslist for a long time.
Yeah, I just looked at it for something else that I was doing recently. I was like, maybe this would be a good way to find something, and I was like, $5? Are you kidding?
Yeah, no. Yeah. Not saving $5.
Yeah, no thanks. I'll just ask around. So you photographed some of my favorite bands. I know that you've listened to some of the people that you've actually photographed. You enjoy their, what's it like photographing people whose music you enjoy listening to?
It's exciting, It's I think some of my favorite assignments were getting to shoot bands that I was a fan of, and you gotta sort of play it cool. You can't totally nerd out, but when I photographed Ozzy Osbourne, I definitely let him know pretty quickly that I was a big Black Sabbath and Ozzy fan, and in that particular instance, I did get him to sign my Blizzard of Oz record.
Nice.
I have hanging in my office.
Well, that's actually, Ozzy was the second concert I ever went to, and it was because my mom took me. She was a huge Ozzy fan, so if I had met Ozzy, the first thing I would have been like, I need an autograph from my mom.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got a cooler mom than me.
It was just like she loved music, and she just thought Ozzy was cute.
Yeah.
So.
Parents hated Ozzy.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
So, if you had to pick some of your favorite shoots, what would those be?
Let's see. When I went to Mexico City to photograph Slayer, I got to photograph them in front of this, centuries-old crumbling church, and I didn't speak a word of Spanish, so I had my friend's assistant Evie with me, who was from California, and he spoke a little bit more Spanish than me, so we were able to convince this. It was on a historical landmark site, and we had to convince the owners of the church that we were going to photograph this band in front of their church. And of course, they didn't realize it was Slayer. That was a classic example of a shoot that almost didn't happen, but then did happen because not only was it difficult to get permission because of the language barrier, but it started raining as I was setting up my lights, and I had no idea if the rain was going to continue or if it was going to stop. And luckily, they were late coming to the set, and the rain had stopped by the time they got there, and everything worked out just fine. I think the other ones are the ones that I've traveled for when I've gone down to LA. I've gone to Australia. I went to Australia with Taking Back Sunday for 4 days, which was great because I had all access. That's another thing. My favorite shoots have usually been the ones where I've had all access and I've been able to spend some time with the artists.
Yeah, it's like
just 15 minutes backstage.
Right. So I mean, that's like you actually get to see the dynamic of the band, and especially if it's somebody you're kind of into, you get to it's like you're the fly on the wall, and you get to hang out and see what's going on and be like, oh, I get to document this. This is awesome. It's like this is something I would do as a fan, but
Yeah. Well, and you get to know them a little bit better. It's not just hi, how's it going? Okay, 15 minutes later you're done. It's like you get to just goof around with them and spend some time with them and get to know them as friends, more or less. I photographed Taking Back Sunday 3 times, and I haven't seen them in many years. They were at the Warped Tour that I was just at. Unfortunately, they weren't on the bill that I was at because I was hoping to run into them to see if they still remembered me and at least say hi, but that didn't happen. I'm sure they remember the Australia trip. That was pretty epic.
I mean, one of my favorite shots of yours, and I still have it, I think you sent it to me as a holiday card one year, is the shot of Billy Gibbons.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, I love that photo. I mean, it's so awesome. It's just I have it on my wall in my office because it's just one of those things. It's just such a cool shot. So what?
Top, that was another good one.
What's the craziest, most involved or weirdest shoot you ever did?
There was a band that I was hired to photograph down in Los Angeles. They called Fight Star. I don't know if you remember Fight Star.
No, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, they had some popularity for a while, but I don't know how much popularity. But anyway, I had to photograph them down in LA, and it was right after some fires had happened in Los Angeles. They had literally just gone out the day of the shoot, or maybe the night prior, and the guys were staying in a hotel, and right behind the hotel there was a hill that was still smoldering, and I was like, oh man, we should go up there and shoot on that hill. And they were like, cool, let's do it. And so we hiked up the top of this hill with my assistant and some lights and 2 of the band members, maybe 3 of the band members, and while we were waiting for the other guys to show up, and the light was going down fast. It was late afternoon, and literally the hill was still smoking in areas, and it was all ash. So it was really cool. It looked like the moon or something. And while we were waiting for the other guys to show up, a security guard in a little golf cart rolls up. He's like, "You gotta get down from that hill." And I'm like, "No,
I want the picture. I want the shot."
And the guys rolled up, and they were saying, "This guy's not letting us up there." And I was like, "Get up here because we've got 5 minutes to do this, and don't listen to him. He doesn't have any say as to what we can do or what we can't do." So I convinced the other guys to get up the hill. We shot the pictures. They looked really cool. It just sucks that it was such a lame band like Fight Star that nobody cares about because they're not going in my portfolio.
Yeah. Well, didn't you do a shoot with Jane's Addiction on an aircraft carrier or something?
No.
Was that you?
That was me.
We talked about that.
There was another band. I can't remember the name of them. And they did a video on an aircraft carrier, and I did sort of behind the scenes photographs for them. They were another, whatever, I can't remember the name of the band, so that's just something about it.
The short-lived is what we call it.
Jane's Addiction, that's on my list of bands that I wish I could have photographed.
But when you still shoot a lot of bands, but for a while there, you were shooting a lot for Rolling Stone and Kerrang, and how were you getting those gigs? Was that a connection you had made through somebody at a show, or what was going on?
No, Kerrang was a classic example of mailers. I sent them a postcard with a photograph of me personally, Gimme Gimmes, that I had shot for Alternative Press magazine. And they called me up from England one morning and asked me if I wanted to photograph Jet, a band from Australia.
Yeah.
They were playing at the Warfield in San Francisco. I think they were doing, I don't know if it was one night with another band from Australia. I can't remember the name of, but they asked me if I wanted to do a feature. And of course I jumped on the opportunity and totally nailed it. And that was back when I was shooting film, I had a Contact 645, which is an amazing camera, and I probably shot like 20 rolls of film, just hanging out with the guys and shooting the show. And I didn't shoot much of the show, but it was, I had all access to them, so we got to hang out backstage after the show and drank a ton of whiskey. And one of my favorite shots, still in my book, quintessential rock and roll shot was, after we were all pretty loaded, they were really loaded. I was like, come on guys, we gotta get let's get one more band set up, and I got them in the hallway of the venue behind them, the green room or whatever, and they were just, it was just classic rock and roll. One guy's leaning against another guy, the other guy's on the floor, they got cigarettes in their hands, they got cocktails in their hands, shot it with a, I can't remember the lens, maybe it was a 90 or something really fast, like 1.2, wide open, available light, so it's just got this beautiful depth of field, and it's just killer. But that job got me in with Kerrang, and they just started calling me, I think at least once a month or every other month I'd start getting an email, and a couple times early on in some of the assignments I thought I totally screwed them up, because I was shooting film, and shooting film can sometimes be challenging.
It's not like digital where you can I'm just gonna take a look and see how this came out. Maybe I need to adjust.
I mean, you shoot Polaroids, but it's just a lot more time. There's a lot more time put into it, and let's just say that I've made some mistakes back in my early days, and I thought for sure that I wasn't getting called, but I guess they went under the radar and they kept calling me.
It's good enough. Good enough to keep going.
It lasted a good 10, 12 years. And Rolling Stone was a little harder to get into. I got one job from them that wasn't even musicians. It was a Tesla designer. So I shot him in his car. But they were a little more picky about, very, very particular about their style of photography, and mine was always too produced, they said, my style.
Too produced?
Too produced, like I use too many lights. They like their...
Kind of gritty. They want like a one light setup or like
or no lights. This was, I was taught to shoot with lights. I like shooting with lights, and it was very difficult for me to just be like, all right, I'm just going to take my camera and shoot available light. That was kind of the thing that they were doing at the time. I never did quite get in with them as much as I tried, so I just gave up. But I did shoot more once. And I shot for Revolver magazine, and I shot for a bunch of other music magazines. But Rolling Stone was always kind of a difficult one to get in with.
Yeah, well, I think just kind of like taking like a slight tangent from that, like just talking about like all the bands you'd worked with. I mean, we've already mentioned like Ozzy and ZZ Top, and like you've also worked with like some of my favorite, like Tenacious D. Like these. But people who are knowns. Like they're known quantities. Like these are famous people, and I think that there's a misconception amongst like photographers who are just starting out that like once you start photographing famous people, getting work is become a lot easier, because look what I've got in my portfolio. I've got this shot of Ozzy Osbourne. Like I photographed Ozzy Osbourne. Like, would you agree with that? Would you disagree that there's like, like
it helps to have celebrities in your book for sure, but it's not going to guarantee you work. You still have to impress the clients with promotional material, and get them on the phone and talk them into hiring you. And once you get the job, then it's another story. But it does help to have celebrities in your book. But like I said, it's no guarantee that it's going to be a win-win situation.
Yeah, because I mean, like differently from you. I mean, like I have photographed a couple of like slightly famous musicians, but I mean, like I've like photographed a bunch of like celebrities at various things, and people are like, well, you photographed Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, that must make things easier for you. Like, no, it doesn't make things easier for me at all. It means I still have to continue like putting out great photos and like make any client that hires you really happy.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you lived in LA and you shot a lot of celebrities and you were known as a celebrity photographer, then I'm sure people would, hire you to shoot more celebrities.
Right.
But
that's because that's the gig that's what you're trying to do. But
yeah, I always lived in markets that were a little less celebrity heavy or concerned with celebrity, and I never really did too much celebrity work.
Well, you're in Nashville now, so what's the music photography scene there like?
It's great. I mean, obviously Nashville's known for its music scene. It's known for its country music, but I'm not that into modern country music, and I'm into a bunch of other stuff. And there is a market for that kind of. There's a lot of bands here that aren't playing country music. So.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, every time I've been to Nashville, there's a lot more than country if you look for it.
Oh yeah, but it's on the surface that's what it's known for is it's country music, which is great because I like the old country, and they do pay a lot of homage to the old the greats, the '70s outlaw guys.
Yeah.
Waylon. Waylon Jennings. Yeah. But it's a lot of it on the surface. Poppy country stuff, which
that's not my.
I'm fine with it. If somebody wants to hire me to photograph Blake Shelton, then I'm sure I'll photograph Blake Shelton. I don't have to like his music.
So when you travel for stuff, like when you travel somewhere else, like what sort of kit do you travel with, or do you like rent stuff when you get there, or like what do you take with you?
Well, it depends on obviously how much. I mean, it's become a lot more complicated and expensive to travel with gear these days. It used to be. You could take 3 cases full of lights, and they wouldn't charge you overweight baggage fees, and they wouldn't have to, make you go through all this hassle to look in the cases. And now it's very difficult. So yes, if I have to use a lot of lights, I will try and rent them when I go on set. But I've also gotten it down to where I can carry what I need pretty easily. I mean, especially with digital technology, it's like you don't need a lot of lights. And especially if there's not a huge budget or not a budget for me to rent stuff, I will just bring a basic kit and just do what I can with available light and a couple little little speed lights or just a little pro photo head here and there. You can do a lot with that.
Yeah, you can do a lot with 1-2 lights, or even just like finding something to reflect it off of. I think you get more creative when you have less to work with, I think, is one of the...
Yeah.
Something I heard somebody say, I can't remember who it was, but it was Vim Vendors, when he was talking about how photography's dead. That's Yeah, he was saying with like everybody taking pictures on their phones, that there's more photography, but photography is dead, and he was like, there's nothing to it, and nobody's like really doing anything with it. And I was like, I think that what you're talking about is just sort of this like constant ongoing photojournalism of your own documentary of your own life that you don't even look back on, you just put out there to like get likes and tell people what's going on in your life. That's which I wouldn't necessarily say is photography. So maybe he needs to take a step back and look at actual photographers.
That's true.
So this is one of those exercises that I sort of like, think about. I think of High Fidelity, like top 5 records, but top 3 musicians or bands that you wish you could have photographed while they were still alive or together if the act is broken up.
That's a good question because there's lots of them. I mean, I grew up. My main era of starting my business was in the '80s, mostly the '90s. There was a ton of good bands in the '90s that were getting photographed all over the place. Radiohead would probably be like on the top. I always liked seeing photographs of Smashing Pumpkins and like one of my favorite photographers is Anton Corbijn, who did Echo and Bunnyman. He did Depeche Mode. He did Joy Division. Like he's a huge hero of mine. Jane's Addiction, always somebody who I want to photograph, and of course the Beastie Boys would have been fun.
Oh, Beastie Boys is on my list.
You name it.
Like Beastie Boys
album covers too. Like, we were talking about the Pixies earlier, but like all the Pixies stuff, all that 480 artwork was just I used to just sit and like admire that stuff while listening to the albums.
The Beastie Boys would definitely be on my list just because they were so like low budget concept. But but a solid concept. Like we've got a solid concept here, but it's like low budget. We're not like trying to do anything super fancy, but it's it definitely has a concept to it. I think number one for me would be Zappa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think just because I'd like to, that would be one of those ones where I'd like to be like the fly on the wall and just like talk to that dude. Cause
Oh yeah.
super smart. And I think you can probably guess the other band that I would. We've hung out enough and talked about music enough. I think you can guess the other one in my top 3. Let's see if.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot.
We've driven in a car enough times together to gigs. Like, I'm surprised, but no, the Smiths.
Oh, the Smiths. Oh yeah. Well, they'd
No.
be pretty cool photographable.
I would want to be like, you know, the backstage guy. Like I would want to go back and capture that dynamic, just like knowing how much they didn't get along,
Yeah.
and like try to like capture that dynamic. Like not something I would probably get paid for, but I think that would be pretty cool.
I think they might be kind of difficult to photograph because they'd be arguing all the time.
Yeah, well.
Morrissey wouldn't want to, Morrissey wouldn't want to take direction.
Yeah, and you can't have any meat on your breath.
Yeah, that's true. Well, getting back to the Beastie Boys really quick, like, and photographing bands in general, the Beastie Boys would have been fun because you could just tell that they wouldn't need a lot of direction. They
No.
would just be able to
They play
move around and like do stuff. Whereas, I'd say 90% of the bands that I photograph, they're all like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, what do we do? And
They want the
always
band.
a challenge.
Yeah, and you're like you almost have to resort to like the band, what I call the band photo. It's like you got like the front man out in front, and everybody's stand cool behind him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah.
That's great. But I love working with artists who just have no fear and just will do whatever they want to do and have fun with it. And that's rare to find that, but I have done that on a few occasions.
All right, well, it's time for the lightning round. What was the first concert you ever went to?
That was Def Leppard and Crocus.
Nice, Crocus.
Back in like 1980, it was the Pyromania tour. So it was probably 1985 or something, 84. I remember.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Yeah, totally.
My first concert was Weird Al. That was just before the Ozzy concert. That was like a couple weeks before the Ozzy concert. First band musician you ever photographed? Do you remember?
Professionally?
Yeah. Well, not even professionally. Like the first band you ever photographed or whatever.
I've been photographing live music forever. So back in the 80s, I photographed Ozzy live. The first band portrait I did was a band called the Fun Junkies. They were a DC area punk rock and roll band, just leather jackets, kind of Ramonesy. And I did a lot of promotional stuff for them. So that was, I've still got that film. Found some flyers the other day with that stuff.
Favorite concert ever? Like just not even photographing, just that you've gone to.
It's a tough one because I've been to so many.
Top 3.
Top 3.
Well, if you want, like you're saying, it's hard to pick.
Well, Radiohead's always fantastic to see live. Like, John Spencer Blues Explosion sticks out because they always put on an epic show. And then I've seen so many good small club shows. There's a band called Zen Gorilla in New York that always blew me away. And it's countless, but those are some that stick out right away.
I'd say my favorite was probably Floyd.
Oh yeah.
I saw them in the early 90s, and it was the first time they had played the entirety of the Dark Side of the Moon album, like straight through in like 20 years. Like once they got to Money, I was like, they're doing the whole album. I mean, that's kind of a real breaking point, and because it's the B, like it's the B side of the album, but.
Yeah.
Like once you get past Great Gig in the Sky, it's like if you're gonna go into Money after that, like you better play the whole album. But it was pretty incredible. I was blown away by like. There's like when we were talking about bands earlier before we started recording about like interaction with the crowd. There was like almost no interaction with the crowd at that point, but it was just like it was so precise that when they started playing. I didn't realize they had started playing. Like I thought that we were listening to a recording at first. and that wasn't the case like throughout the show. I mean, there was a live vibe to it later on, but like when they started out, like it was like Dave Gilmour came out and he's like playing "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," and he's just playing those opening chords. I'm like, oh, all right, yeah, they're just playing the CD or whatever. It's like whatever, and I look down and I'm like, oh my god. But yeah, that was just an incredible. That was like a 3-hour show.
Oh boy, that's a long one.
Yeah, and like, but the thing is, no opening act because nobody's going to open for Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
So you were just mentioning this. You still like see a lot of like smaller, sort of like quote undiscovered bands. Like, who have you photographed or seen lately that really impressed you?
There's a band in Nashville called Black Venus that I instantly liked. They're just two-piece, kind of like the Black Keys, but I'd say Black Keys mixed with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. You know, they're just really swampy, dark, heavy blues. I actually did their recent video for a song they did called Birth, which is out on YouTube at the moment. But those guys are particularly fun to see. Who else is a local band that I like to see? I'm trying to think at the moment. There's a band in town called The Cunning, which is pretty good. My friend Steve used to play bass with them. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but
that's fine. If you think of anything, I'll throw it up on the blog. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. We've been talking with Jeremy Harris. Jeremy will be back with us for some future episodes, and we'll talk to him soon. Jeremy, thank you very much for being with us.
Great, thank you.
And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
And now leaving you with a little bit of the useless information that fills my brain. Did you know that the world's termites outweigh the world's human beings 10 to 1? 10 to 1. Sleep tight.
Well, you better start listening, 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 better start, 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 better start.
I'd like to thank my friend Jeremy Harris for being with us to discuss rock and roll photography. Music for this episode by The Hip Shakes. And thank you for listening to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me what you'd like to hear about in future episodes, or who you'd like me to interview. Also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/nerdyphotographer. Follow along on Instagram and Twitter at TheNerdyPhoto. You can also support the Nerdy Photographer by going to patreon.com/nerdyphotographer. Depending on your contribution level, you can get all kinds of sick discounts and secret subscriber-only content. Until next time, talk nerdy to me.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heartbeat beating about? You better listen.